Like my siren head flag? Flag. Okay, anyways. I'm doing 5 stories today for 5 or 10 minutes each. Hopefully this will go well. The first one... Okay, let me just think here. I'm just going to think of something quick. Once there was a... Okay. Trying to think of something, but I'm running out of a blank. There once was a girl who owned a Ouija board. She didn't think it would be anything that would have any serious repercussions, though, spoiler alert, at the end of the story, she ended up having some repercussions, both spiritually as well as legally. And she would hold seances in her house. This was not a good idea to do at the time, and was actually... Instead of summoning the lost souls of her friends' loved ones who had passed and gone to the spirit world, she ended up coming across some demons. That was what she was doing intentionally. She was not trying to communicate with the spirits of the actual dead relative of her friends, but instead was either talking to Satan or some other little demon that is running amok. As much as she was accessing these demons, as if like on the internet, like you would friend request people, sometimes you get a stinker, she would summon those devils. She would summon the evil people or the evil spirits instead of the friends' loved ones on purpose, not for any accidental reason, but for on purpose reasons. That being said, she was also into the dark arts, not as in witchcraft or anything like that, but more into more of the evil Satanist stuff. And she was... Tell me if this doesn't make any sense. And she was doing this on purpose. Usually when you end up doing a Ouija board, you have to do it around friends. That part she did correctly. Also, she ended up doing this at midnight, the witching hour, in the dark, alone, and sometimes this would have heavy repercussions on her as she was trying to go about trying to be more powerful than her friends. She ended up having fake friends, obviously. I think we all know what fake friends are. We've had those before in our lives, not just on social media, but also in reality as well. This girl, who I'll name Lisa, was bullied by her friends and didn't realize that they were actually her tormentors and that they were fake friends. So she acted like the stereotypical spooky kid, which was to go around hissing at people and trying to intimidate them with their looks and stuff. That was not what usually you should do. Even if you are a spooky kid in some cases, you should not be able to act like an asshole. But she was the queen of assholes because soon enough people started to think she was possessed. She was the stereotypical spooky kid. Instead of following nature's rules, she followed the devil's rules, and that frightened a lot of people that were around her. Also, she was known to try to do certain things that might trigger people. I won't mention what they are. But basically, She was not into some good shit. Also, she was into drugs and other stuff that was causing some problems for her mentally, which would also lead to her DTD, or dissociative trance disorder, where you end up thinking you're possessed, but you're not. It's a neurological or psychological issue that stems from trauma. That being said, she had some trauma in the past that was of a nature, and she couldn't do very much about it. She was always threatened with death and couldn't say what she was wanting to say was that this asshole was assaulting her and stuff like that, so she ended up having to go and tell the darker spirits. This turned out not to be DTD, but instead was actually her being possessed. As she ended up splitting her personalities like DID, but that wasn't the case either. It turned out each one of her other alters had a different sounding voice that was unworldly, almost earthreal, and supernatural sounding. By the time she was almost ready to be exorcised of her demons, she ended up being emaciated looking and was close to death. By the time the exorcist got there to save her soul, she had passed. Her soul was now the devil's. Her body was going to be buried, and she was never more than considered queen bitch, and nothing more, nothing less. She was, they did not realize what she was struggling with at the time, which was really haunting her instead of the devil. This was a very sad story. Story 2. There was a girl who was supposed to be taking care of a neighbor's goldfish. This might sound preposterous. So she tried, but she more or less was interested in going to parties, getting tattoos, getting drunk, whatever young people do these days, instead of taking care of a life. And as she was going about her daily life, which was debauchery and stuff, not that tattoos are debauchery, but the rest of her behavior was debauchery, she ended up being reminded by her older parents, very older parents, take care of the beta fish. Take care of the beta fish. Take care of the beta fish, why don't you? And she said, the beta fish, I don't care. I've had enough of the beta fish. I would do whatever I want to get rid of it, and even if it means selling my soul. By the time she was through this argument with her parents, she took this toilet, she went to the bathroom, put the toilet seat up, took the fish tank and dumped it, and then soon enough she flushed the fish down the toilet as if a nice you to her parents, only to be haunted by that fish. This was the beta fish from hell, as she was now going to be haunted by this beta fish that was going to haunt her for basically as long as she lived. She was going to be haunted by this beta fish. And as long as she did not care for another life in a proper fashion, this beta fish would show up floating as if it was swimming happily and would just creep her out, then would disappear and fizzle off in a second. Would leave her freaked out and creeped out and would make her go like, what the fuck is going on here? That is basically what happened. She ended up having a child. The same damn thing happened where she ended up abandoning the child because she'd rather live her great life instead of giving her child a good life. The child died in hospital from malnourishment. And as the kid was dying, she said she didn't give either. And then she ended up saying that, and each time these events were happening, the beta fish would be there floating around as if it was swimming happily, like as if a fuck you to her as well. Soon enough, she ended up realizing that she ended up dealing with other things, other pets like dogs, cats, didn't take care of them, neglected them, didn't give a rat's about them, and ended up realizing that soon enough, not just the beta fish started showing up, but the nameless child she had started showing up, saying, "Why didn't you take care of us? Why didn't you take care of us?" As the amount of souls kept popping up when she was going around, more or less neglecting living things as if these things were air plants, she ended up realizing that she was in for when the last baby she had was neglected, and this one was able to talk soon before it died. The kid said, "Why you not take care?" Every time she turned around, and even when she wasn't taking care of an air plant, we all know what an air plant is, people. They're the plants you don't have to take care of. You can neglect them to hell, and they can still survive. Just have to spray water on them once in a while. Anyways, so after her air plant seemingly had died, she ended up seeing the whole menagerie of spirits of the people and things that she neglected. And she ended up realizing that they were there to collect her soul. She was going to the hellfire for neglecting not just animals, but also children as well. It was a wonder this was not brought to the police's attention, as this was well hidden. But she should have been arrested, but instead her soul was collected instead. When her soul was collected, she was arrived at the circle of the violent wasters, the eighth circle of hell, I believe it is, where you end up not where you deal with murderers and suicides. The suicides become treason. You have to rip off a branch to talk to the damn tree and stuff. So that was the ring of hell that she was in. Also, she was tormented for eternity, and her particular soul was constantly being collected, as if she was constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again. But it turned out she was trying to pay for what she did. She tried to find redemption, but she was still in hell. She couldn't get out of it. She was a violent waster, basically, because she was neglectful. That being said, she was not He wasted away in hell before eternity ever came. Story 3. The dog that tasted flesh. There was a dog that was treated fresh meat, treated with fresh meat each day. Now you should know that you should be able to just feed your dog dog snacks and dog food. That's not gonna leave them having a taste in their mouth and wanting more of whatever is so delectable about rotting flesh, particularly whether it be from an animal or otherwise. So the dog was being fed fresh meat from the butcher. It loved the taste of blood, and the dog was starting to go on a murderous rampage. Soon enough, the dog was caught eating a squirrel just for its meat. Wasn't for protein or anything, but for meat. And the next thing you know, the dog had to be put down. The owner was notified, then was brought to a charge in court. Then the owner of the dog had to see the dog get put down, his beloved pet, which he thought he didn't do anything wrong to. But seeing as that this was fresh meat from a butcher and he can taste the blood, this dog was bloodthirsty for anything. If you've ever read anything from Andrew Vash, you will know that dogs, once they get a taste of something, they're obsessed about it. And that being said, the dog had to be humanely euthanized. But then, in the jail cell for animal cruelty, I'm sorry to say that, that was what the owner was charged with, for making it a bloodthirsty hound. The owner was haunted by the dog's spirit in jail. First, it made pining sounds as if it was like, why is this happening? Why am I dead and you seem to still live? Why did you do this to me, make me bloodthirsty and stuff? Then it got angrier, it started snarling. Soon enough, the dog took its rage out on the angry owner as a spirit, and then soon enough, the next day, while the prison guards were doing their morning check to make sure everyone was alive, because it's standard when you're in prison that when you go to prison, you go and make sure that the person is still alive, especially if they've done things to children, women, or animals. You are low on the totem pole there. As well as if you've been anything not savory, even though if deemed by other criminals, you will end up being murdered before morning. And then they found the dog owner who was serving his time for animal cruelty, let's call it that, for having it eat fresh meat, raw meat from the butcher. And the dog, they didn't realize until it was autopsy time that he was eaten by a dog, not by another inmate. How did the dog get there? And that's when they realized it was the spirit of this other dog that he kept. it was the only one dog that he kept, and the dog, in, as a ghost, came back, haunted him, didn't like what was going on or how the owner answered him, so the dog bit him right here. That being said, that was the end of the owner. It said the dog still runs around the prison at midnight to the witching hour, the end of the witching hour, I should say, or the switching hour as they call it in law enforcement corrections, where you end up seeing some really weird stuff happen, especially on a full moon. And you can see some people getting dragged out of their bunks by their ankles by an invisible force, which was the owner's dog who was wanting just a taste of blood. Story 5, and this one is based on book I read in school that I actually enjoyed, other than that damn thing. Silverwing, which was the idea that, oh Christ, one time, this is basically a part of the book, so I'm not going to tell you what book it is because I'm sorry for the spoiler alerts, people, trigger warning. So one kid ended up reading a book in the middle of the night, was just reading a book before he fell asleep, like we all do. We all fall asleep to a book. His book was was a lot scary than, let's say, Stephen King or Clive Barker. His taste in books were more macabre. As he was just going to turn into the night, he had his windows open, which were in the direction of a forest. As he was going through the forest with his eyes, he didn't see very much. Then he could hear the whispering sounds of stones, 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 ever growing to the tone where I'm talking, and then to yelling, chanting, stones, 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 stones. And then he ended up hearing the scream of a woman being, well, stoned to death. Now, keep in mind, this was in this part of the world when this kind of shit doesn't happen. Okay? That's the twist, is why was a woman being basically stoned to death in a forest in North America in the Appalachian Mountains? That's when he ended up deciding he was going to close the window and try to ignore it. Then he ended up hearing the same damn thing, from a whisper to a yelling chant, stones, 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 and that blood-curdling scream of that victim who hurt, and that one last thought of the last stone that hit her. He ended up realizing that he had to find out. He thought he was going to call the police and ask them to investigate, but he thought, wait a second, this could be a hoax, or this could be his friends pulling some fucking prank. And as he was wondering what to do with his goddamn dilemma, should I go to sleep? Should I call 911? Should I go to sleep? He ended up falling into a very, very uneasy sleep. And he realized that the idea of this might be a very long-lasting thing, so he wanted to know, why was this happening to him? Every time in the summer, this would happen on clockwork 3 o'clock in the morning, just when he was going to turn in for the night. He was a night owl. He ended up realizing that found himself at the public office's main place and was looking at the archives. That's when he realized that he saw a picture of the same offending forest that was behind his house, same property, and it said murder at in forest. He read this very almost ancient article, which was from the 1800s, give or take the 1800s. And when people didn't really understand paganism, witchcraft, or shamanism, or herb healing, or women doctors for that matter, anything like that was considered witchcraft. And at the time, there was a woman doctor who got stoned, who was more into herbs and anything else. She was stoned for practicing witchcraft, and then she ended up realizing she was going to die when the first stone hit her there on the forehead, and then she screamed. That was the last anyone heard of her, and it happened on his family's property. It really scared him. He wanted to know why his property was the one site that had to be his of this woman's murder. He could still see the ghost of the woman, and when he saw the picture of the woman, he put two and two together and realized that that was the woman he saw being murdered or stoned to death. That's when he realized that most, and this is very true, most ghosts haunt you because they don't have justice or they don't have any satisfaction in life, or they've died a violent way and their killers haven't been brought to justice. You can almost think about Kaylee Anthony being a ghost one day because she's not going to get any justice, unfortunately to say that. Just as an example, this is their way of testifying in court by haunting and reenacting what had happened to them. If you like my content or my stories, feel free to subscribe and hit that like button. If you like more spooky content, as I said, subscribe, like. Tell me what stories you want to hear, and I'll look them up or whatever, and I'll tell them right from my mouth. So feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the bell button. Tell me what you think of my Siren Head is Real flag or tapestry.